so important that we recognize the value of this legislation, and I would hope and like to see unanimous support in favor of it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member will have a very short time following question period for the rest of the questions and comments following his remarks. I think a minute and a half, perhaps time enough for one question and answer. Statements by members. Déclaration de député. The honourable member for North Vancouver.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in the House today to congratulate a talented constituent from my riding of North Vancouver, Emily Young. Emily recently won 2 medals at the Paralympic Games in Pyeongchang, silver and bronze medals in cross-country skiing. All North Vancouverites and all Canadians are so very proud of Emily and what she has accomplished. If you know anything about Emily's background, you will know that these medals are but one of the latest chapters in a lifetime of outstanding personal achievement. Emily's achievements are all the more remarkable as this was Emily's first Paralympic Games. Congratulations, Emily. The drive, passion, and perseverance that you have shown as a wrestler, a skier, a biathlete, as a teammate, and as an athlete are an inspiration to all Canadians. I look forward to following your story wherever it takes you and wherever you take it.
The honourable member for Barrie Innisfil.
Mr. Speaker, on Friday, April 13th, just before the start of National Volunteer Week, I'll be hosting my second annual Barrie Innisfil Volunteer Awards. Last year, I honoured 11 recipients from across the riding for their devotion and dedication to the residents of Barrie Innisfil. This year, I'll be honouring Margarita Papp-Delaney, who recently passed away. Ms. Papp-Delaney was an outstanding advocate for the disabled in our community, and I had the pleasure of working with her while I was a Barrie City Councillor. Residents of Barrie Innisfil have until Monday, April 3rd to nominate an outstanding citizen for recognition. Nominations are being accepted through my website or by downloading a form from the website and emailing it in. I look forward to celebrating the youth, seniors, women, men, and service groups that serve our community with pride, distinction, and dedication at the Barrie Public Library ceremony on April 13th. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Charlottetown.
Mr. Speaker, on March 27th, we celebrate World Theatre Day. Canadians enjoy live theatre in communities large and small, including in my riding of Charlottetown. Locals, tourists, and Canadians from coast to coast to coast come to the Confederation Centre of the Arts to experience high-quality productions such as Anne of Green Gables, the musical. Le théâtre fait...
Theatre makes our communities dynamic, inclusive places. Theatre helps us to reflect, express ourselves, and develop our creativity. By sharing our stories, we're better able to understand each other. This is a space where we can address societal issues and where we can explore solutions.
Of our love of theatre, I would like to celebrate our artists and creators and all those who contribute to engage Canadians through theatre in their communities. And I hope that all Canadians take the time to enjoy a theatre presentation in their community on World Theatre Day.
The honourable member for Vancouver Kingsway.
Mr. Speaker, I recently hosted a community town hall to hear from my constituents on the housing crisis in Vancouver. Passionate, thoughtful, sensible, and poignant points were made by a wide variety of residents. I heard how the housing crisis has torn a massive hole in our social fabric. I heard how it has demoralized a generation, fractured families, hollowed out neighborhoods, and threatened our economic foundation. There was a clear message that far too many folks have lost the ability to live, work, and prosper in the city they love. Mr. Speaker, the housing crisis is real. It must be addressed. It must be remedied. We must chart a better, fairer course, one that works for everyone, not just the wealthy and privileged. The Liberal government cannot call this a crisis and delay funding for years at the same time. We need federal leadership now to ensure affordable, secure housing is available for every Canadian.
The honourable member for Sydney Victoria.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to recognize a group of passionate, determined women in my riding called Cape Breton Voices, who came together on March 15th in partnership with Equal Voice to host the first panel on women in politics. In the panel, 10 women representing different levels of government put aside their political stripes and shared stories of their personal experience since entering politics and the issues that surround women's involvement in the political process. As our Prime Minister said time and time again, If we want to change politics, we need to add more women. Aside from hosting panels, Cape Breton Voices regularly speaks up on topics such as inclusion, business, immigration, governance, accountability, and of course their communities. Mr. Speaker, Cape Breton has a long history of strong women, and I commend the women of Cape Breton Voices for uniting together to stand for Cape Breton and all it has to offer the world.
The honourable member for Beauport, Côte de Beaupré, Île d'Orléans, Charlevoix. For several years, human trafficking and youth prostitution in Canada has been worsening. Innocent young girls are victims of pimps who forever destroy their lives. To counter this serious problem, the former government's Bill C-352 was adopted unanimously by all parties. But the current government is refusing to sign the decree to implement it, and instead has presented its revised, watered-down version, Bill C-38. Since the number of victims has been piling up, and the government is complicit in this unacceptable social problem. Like Canadians, I'm outraged to see the worsening situation in this area in Canada, and even more so because by a government that claims to be feminist. It's standing by passively and allowing criminals to continue to destroy the lives of the young girls they claim to protect and help. It's the government's responsibility to take immediate action for victims. The honourable member for Saint-Jean. Mr. Speaker, on January 18th, Ms. Georgette Leblanc became Parliament's official poet. Today, March 27th, we're celebrating her arrival on the Hill. Although she grew up in Bay Ste. Marie in Nova Scotia, she was born in Saint-Jean-sur-Richelieu. I'm especially proud of that today. And I couldn't but mention her origins from my writing. Her diverse artistic background will enable her to be a standard bearer for Canadian poetry, which will promote the spread of this literary form. The eighth to hold the position, she will also write poetic texts used by Parliament during official ceremonies. So it's with honor that, on behalf of the constituents and of my riding of Saint-Jean, I congratulate our new Poet Laureate.
The honourable member for Don Valley North.
Mr. Speaker, in any given year, 1 in 5 Canadians will personally experience a mental health issue or illness, and immigrants and refugees in Canada are under more stress than people born in Canada. Since 1982, the Harmful Mental Health Association has helped well over 100,000 newcomers manage mental issues. Many former clients and their family members are now among its 300 long-time volunteers. Harmful's 64 staff members speak 7 different languages and provide culturally sensitive services within the Greater Toronto area. I salute this valuable institution for keeping newcomers mentally healthy and happy for 36 years. The name says it all. In the original language, Harmf means healthy and happy. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Carlton Trail, Eagle Creek.
Mr. Speaker, the longer this Liberal government is in power, it's becoming clearer that they consider anyone who disagrees with them, including women with a different point of view, to be beneath contempt. That's what the Minister of Finance said in committee yesterday. Anybody who challenges or asks tough questions about a Liberal policy is, and I quote, a Neanderthal. It's the same old Liberal arrogance all over again. And it's more of the same fake feminism for which these Liberals are gaining a global reputation. Women in Canada have the right to speak their minds without being insulted for it by the Minister of Finance. The Minister should apologize to the member he insulted and to all Canadian women for his ridiculous and insulting comments.
Yeah. The honourable member for Ajax.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to pay tribute to Roger Anderson, who tragically passed away as our chairman of Durham Region. Roger was both
a colleague for many years when I served in regional council and on the police services board, and also a friend. It's impossible in 60 seconds to summarize the contribution that somebody makes to public life. But I think I can say on behalf of all members of the House that we recognize that living a public life is tough. It's hard on families. It means being away a lot. And Roger, over the course of his life, whether as a councillor or as a deputy mayor or as our regional chairman, gave so much to our community and didn't have the opportunity to retire and be able to enjoy time alone with his family. And I want to say to his family how sad I am that Roger's passing has happened. As a businessman, as a politician, as a policeman, he did so much for Durham. And Roger, we remember you and thank you for your service.
Honourable member for New Brunswick Southwest.
Mr. Speaker, it's an honor to rise in the House today to recognize the residents of New Brunswick Southwest for their overwhelming support to the community of Deer Island following a devastating fire at the island's main employer, Patrel International, on March 1st. On this Firefighters on the Hill Day, I want to recognize and thank the first responders in my riding, as well as those across the country who act so bravely and swiftly to keep us safe. Thank you to the management of Patrel International for their support to their employees, Daryl Tidd, a lead hand who volunteered to act as the official spokesperson, area employers, including Connors Brothers, Northern Harvest, and Cook Aquaculture, who offered employment to displaced workers, Service Canada, and the provincial government and agencies. Despite these difficult circumstances, the kindness, resiliency, and community spirit demonstrated by everyone has created the most positive outcome possible. Thank you.
The honourable member for Calgary-Minderport.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to recognize a citizen who has made an outstanding contribution to the Calgary Jewish community, interfaith relations, education, and to the advancement of Canada-Israel relations. After 14 years, Judy Shapiro is retiring from her role as Assistant Executive Director of the Calgary Jewish Federation. Judy also worked with Calgary Centre for Israel and Jewish Affairs. While steering her community through many troubling incidents of anti-Semitism, Judy's work in human rights and Holocaust education built strong, enduring bridges between many diverse communities. Calgary's Jewish community has been honored to have Judy as their champion. We are grateful for her legacy of making our city a better place. Thank you.
The honourable member for Pitt Meadows, Maple Ridge.
Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Speaker, today firefighters from across Canada have come to Ottawa to talk about how we can save lives in the event of a fire. The bravery that these men and women display day in and day out is a testament of their courage and desire to protect Canadians.
Victory has come with sacrifice, and we must remember the 1,300 firefighters who have fallen in a line of duty since 1848. Having met with both fire departments in Pitt Meadows and Maple Ridge, it's clear that the well-being of their members should be a priority. Since the last election, we committed to looking after the families of fallen firefighters and first responders across Canada and created the Memorial Grant Program, which will take effect in the upcoming fiscal year.
We must also remember, experiencing traumatic events can be daily occurrences for first responders.
First responders, past and present, thank you for your service.
The honourable member for Elmwood, Transcona.
Thank you. I rise to voice concerns about the current plan to decommission the nuclear research reactor in Pinawa, Manitoba, located just 500 meters from the Winnipeg River. When the reactor was built, the federal government promised to restore the site to greenfield conditions upon decommissioning. The original plan would do that by removing the contaminated reactor parts from the site, but the plan has changed. The federal government converted this important project to a for-profit job and awarded it to Canadian Nuclear Laboratories, a conglomerate of multinational companies, some with a record of nuclear safety breaches around the globe. The environmental assessment process was gutted by the Harper government and left licensing to a regulator some see as too cozy with industry. Most importantly, to save money, CNL has decided not to remove the contaminated reactor parts, but to bury and grout them in place instead. If the concrete fails sometime in the future, it'll be impossible to safely remove the contaminated material. For the sake of future generations in Manitoba, I urge this government to reconsider before a decision is taken that no one can reverse.
The Honourable Member for Mégantic-Clérable. Mr. Speaker, on March 23rd, a senseless act of terrorism occurred in France, in Carcassonne and Trèbes. 4 people were killed after having crossed paths with a despicable individual, a radicalized Islamist. After having killed the driver of a car that he wanted to steal, the terrorist went to a grocery store. And it was at that point that the police officer, Arnaud Beltrame, showed extraordinary bravery before being tragically killed. He changed places with a person being held by the terrorist. He saved a life, but he gave up his own. He is a hero, and we need to honor his memory not only in his country but here as well. Mr. Speaker, the world is changing, and these men and women face unknown dangers. They are police officers in the Quebec Police Force, the RCMP, the municipal police forces, our protective services here, the armed forces. All these men and women on a daily basis face dangers. On behalf of my colleagues here in the House of Commons, I salute Arnaud Beltrame for his sacrifice. We will remember him. The Honourable Member for Louis-Hébert. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm proud to rise today to highlight the 50th anniversary of Development and Peace, an organization which showcases Canada abroad. Thanks to its community and humanitarian development projects, Development and Peace helps vulnerable people across the globe by focusing on universal values of social justice and harmony. Our government is also focusing on international assistance and gender equality. Development and Peace is convinced of the role that women play in a better economic justice. Our increase in the budget for international assistance through the creation of an independent ombudsman to oversee the actions of corporate entities abroad are examples. There are some 13,000 members of Development and Peace in Canada who are working across the world, and I would congratulate them on the work they are doing. I say you're an inspiration to us all.
Questions orales, oral questions. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister breached the law when he went on his trip to visit the Aga Khan. It is unacceptable that he is now refusing to tell Canadians which additional gifts he received during that trip. What was that unacceptable gift, and what did he do with it? Right Honourable the Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, as the members opposite know, I worked with the Ethics Commissioner for months last year to respond to all her questions. I was completely open with her, answered all her questions, and afterwards I accepted not only her recommendations, but I also followed them. That is why Canadians are reassured, because we have an Ethics Commissioner who holds us to high standards, much higher than the partisanship in this House.
Transparency rules exist for a reason. Not only did the Prime Minister accept an illegal trip to a private island, he went there and received additional gifts from someone who is actively lobbying the government. Those are the facts. So will the Prime Minister come clean and tell Canadians, did he return those illegal and unacceptable gifts before he could be lobbied again?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I worked with the Ethics Commissioner throughout last year, answering all her questions, putting forward full disclosure, full transparency. She made a report which we accepted, and we followed every single recommendation she made within that report. But, Mr. Speaker, as often happens at holiday time, when you're with family friends, you exchange gifts. And if the member opposite really wants to know, I gave him a sweater, and he gave me an overnight bag.
Honourable Member of the Opposition. Order. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. Order.
Mr. Speaker, it was the fact that he accepted the gift in the first place that broke the ethics laws. C'est un grand problème que les médias ont.
The media were given a briefing session organized by the Prime Minister's office after a catastrophic trip where the Prime Minister attended a dinner along with a guilty criminal. But the Prime Minister and his minister even implied that this briefing contained classified information. Can the Prime Minister tell us who in his office helped provide that confidential information to the media? The Right Honourable the Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, at no point in time did members of the public service provide classified information to the media. The members opposite know this full well. But what is strange is that the leader of the opposition, who is in a position to be able to receive a classified briefing session on what happened, is still refusing that briefing because he does not want to know the truth. He simply wants to continue play petty politics as he's doing now. Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Convicted terrorist to attend an official Government of Canada event in India. Now, someone in the Prime Minister's office then ordered the National Security Advisor to tell the media that the Indian government was responsible for this embarrassment. But yesterday, the Prime Minister and the Public Safety Minister suggested that the content of that media briefing was classified. Can the Prime Minister inform us who in his office helped orchestrate the release of classified information to the media?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, of course, at no point did members of the public service ever reveal classified information to the media, nor would they. What the issue is here is the leader of the official opposition so wants to be able to play political games with this issue that he plugs his ears, refuses to know the truth, and is continually refusing to get a full classified briefing on this situation. The only reason he's doing that is so that he can continue to play petty politics instead of getting to the truth.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
The only reason why the Prime Minister is offering me a briefing for classified information in my capacity as a Privy Councillor is to prevent me from asking questions about his disastrous trip in India and the cover-up that he helped orchestrate. Asking for is for the same information that has been provided to the media to be provided to the House of Commons. Simple. The Prime Minister has just affirmed that classified information was not provided to the media. Why then can that same information not be provided to the House?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, only Stephen Harper's Conservative Party would think that giving information to the media is somehow hiding information from Canadians. Mr. Speaker, the question is, why doesn't the leader of the opposition want to know the truth? Canadians understand that when it comes to intelligence issues and security issues, there is a need for classified information. We have offered to the member opposite to know the truth, but he prefers to play political games.
Honourable Member for the Honourable Member for Rimouski-Nejet-Témiscouata Basque. Mr. Speaker, the Ethics Commissioner's report was not a series of recommendations. It was a penalty for having broken the Conflict of Interest Act. Now, the Prime Minister received a gift during that trip. And we know, thanks to the Ethics Commissioner, that this gift cannot be listed on the public registry because it was deemed to be unacceptable by the Commissioner. So what that means is that that trip was worth more than $1,000. It wasn't simply an overnight bag or a sweater. So my question to the Speaker is, what is this gift that he received from the Aga Khan? The Right Honourable the Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, I already answered the question not only in the House, but also to the Ethics Commissioner in person. The reason we have an Ethics Commissioner is precisely so that we can resolve situations, so that we can verify situations in a non-partisan way. Canadians can rest assured that I worked with the Ethics Commissioner. I answered all her questions. And yes, I followed all her recommendations afterwards so that these situations can be avoided in the future. The member for Rimouski-Nejet-Témiscouata, Basque. Well, the report actually contained a penalty, so the Prime Minister should stop hiding behind the Ethics Commissioner. Listen, he said himself in his open letter to Canadians, and I quote, "I am committed to leading an open, honest government that is accountable to Canadians, lives up to the highest ethical standards." Mr. Speaker, I don't think that accepting a gift deemed to be unacceptable by the Ethics Commissioner lives up to the highest ethical standards. We still don't have the open, transparent government that the Prime Minister forgot. Has he forgotten the core principles that were meant to guide his behavior? The Right Honourable the Prime Minister. We continue to be open and transparent in a way that the Canadians wanted after 10 years of the Stephen Harper government. We continue to be accountable and responsible so the Canadians can trust that what we are doing is building a better country with more opportunities for our young people, for our seniors. We're delivering on our promises. We are meeting the expectations of the Canadians and doing what they asked us to do.
Mr. Speaker, this old city on the Rideau has heard some pretty outrageous whoppers over the decades defending the loopholes for graft and pork barrel and lobbying and rum bottle politics. So it's not often you hear a new one. But kudos to the Prime Minister for coming up for a new loophole. You see, when he accepts a gift from a billionaire lobbyist like the Aga Khan, if it's appropriate, he's compelled to report it. But since it was inappropriate, he told us that he didn't have to report it. Oh, come on. Is that his new standard, that the door to the PMO is open as long as the lobbyists bring the gifts?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we have a conflict of interest and ethics commissioner so that Canadians can be reassured that above the personal attacks that happen in this House of Commons, the wild accusations and the mudslinging, there is someone to look into the facts of the matter, to gather those facts together, make a report, and make recommendations. As I said, we fully accept the report of the Ethics Commissioner and have moved forward to ensure it never happens again and that we fulfill all her recommendations.
Honourable Member for Timmins, James Bay.
Okay. So speaking of loopholes that are big enough you can fly the Aga Khan's private helicopter through, I note that the Prime Minister's beach buddy on that trip also didn't register his inappropriate gift. You know, it's a simple thing. All members of Parliament have to register all travel that's paid for by lobbyists and third parties. Yet the member for Mount Pearl St. John's didn't bother to register his trip to Billionaires Island. So what's with that? Were they like shifting loophole ideas when they were hanging out on the beach? Why does the Prime Minister have such a low standard for accountability for his caucus?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, when we report gifts, when we report issues and actions, we report to the Ethics Commissioner. I sat down, answered all the Ethics Commissioner's questions, disclosed fully everything that happened, and she made her report. She did the work that she is asked to do by this House, by Canadians, that is, get to the nub of the matter, get to the heart of the facts, rather than fall into the partisan mudslinging that unfortunately characterizes this House.
The Honourable Opposition House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, for weeks we have been asking as parliamentarians for the same briefing that the media received from the government's National Security Advisor. For weeks we have been denied. In fact, last week we had to sit here while the government and the Liberals stood up over 20 hours protecting the Prime Minister from us being allowed to hear what the media received. Now, yesterday we were told it's classified. All of a sudden, the media must be part of the Privy Council. It was classified. Today, the Keystone Cops seem to have changed their story. So my question is, why can't we, as parliamentarians, hear the same...
The Honourable Minister of Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, the media have already reported everything extensively, and there was no classified information. As senior Conservative bloggers have pointed out, the key issue is the broader and classified context around the Atwell matter, and we have offered the Leader of the Opposition a full classified briefing, but so far he has declined. So the essential question is, why is he choosing to remain deliberately uninformed and misinformed?
Honourable Opposition House Leader.
This is incredibly serious, Mr. Speaker. The government sent out the National Security Advisor to the media to float out a story that India was responsible for their absolutely disastrous India trip. We want to know what the media was told. And now the Public Safety Minister is saying, just read the newspaper and you're fine. No, Mr. Speaker, we are elected by Canadians to get an answer from this media.
The Honourable Minister of Public Safety.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The point clearly is, why would the Leader of the Opposition decline to get the full story and prefer to operate on bits and snippets of misinformation or disinformation or incomplete information? Mr. Speaker, the government has made the offer to the Leader of the Opposition to be fully informed of all of the context around this situation so that he can, in fact, function in an appropriate leadership role. He has declined, and the only conceivable reason is because he wants to play a political game.
The Honourable Member for Charlesbourg, Haute-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has just confirmed that the information provided by Daniel Jean to the media was not confidential. And so why isn't the same briefing being given to parliamentarians? Is it embarrassing for him?
Honourable Minister of Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, what the Leader of the Opposition needs to have is all the facts. All the facts have been offered to the Leader of the Opposition. His response thus far is he'd rather have partial facts, incomplete facts, or inaccurate facts. Mr. Speaker, if he wants the full story, he can have it. If he declines to get the full story, one can only conclude he has a partisan reason for turning it down.
What's the full story? Order. There's far too much noise today. If members have not read the standing orders, I recommend them to the members, because they do include provisions about not interrupting, and they should take those seriously, because I'm getting tired of it.
The Honourable Member for Charlesbourg, Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, the Minister hasn't answered the question, therefore he is complicit with the Prime Minister. A briefing was provided to reporters, and so it would be perfectly normal for the Public Safety Committee of the House of Commons be given the same briefing from Daniel Jean. Why is the Minister maintaining his position and defending the indefensible on behalf of the Prime Minister?
What I'm defending, Mr. Speaker, is the entire and complete description of the facts. What the opposition is declining or refusing to do is to accept a full briefing that would provide to the Leader of the Opposition all of the facts and all of the context so that he can make a full informed judgment of what transpired. If he declines to be fully informed, if he prefers to operate on bits and tidbits of partial information, one has to be pretty suspicious of that motive.
Honourable Member for Durham.
Well, Mr. Speaker, here are the facts. On February 22nd, the Prime Minister's office arranged a briefing with the media and the National Security Advisor. Today, the Prime Minister confirmed that was not classified. Today, Mr. Speaker, you ruled that MPs are entitled to hear from Mr. Jean, but there's been no order of Parliament because the Liberals are blocking the Public Safety Committee. When will the Prime Minister end this cover-up and allow Mr. Jean to testify?
Honourable Minister of Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, the first step in any process is for the Leader of the Opposition to fully inform himself of the facts. That opportunity is available to him. He has so far turned it down. Mr. Speaker, to fully inform the Leader of the Opposition of the full context of the Atwell situation, we have offered the Leader of the Opposition that classified briefing. he has turned it down so far. That amounts, Mr. Speaker, to willful ignorance and irresponsibility, and the Conservatives are setting themselves up to be pawns of other interests.
The honourable member for Durham. Order.
Mr. Speaker, since they're continuing to block us from asking Mr. Jean, the National Security Advisor, questions, I'll ask the Prime Minister. The CBC story that ran after Mr. Jean's briefing to journalists said that he told journalists to ask questions about whether the Indian government invited Jaspal Atwal to the Prime Minister's events in India. Did the Prime Minister's office ask the National Security Advisor to plant a story about the Indian government to deflect from their terrible India trip?
Honourable Minister of Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, we all have the utmost respect and trust for Daniel Jean. He has served governments of all political stripes with honour and distinction for 35 years. For Stephen Harper, he was the Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs. He spoke for the former Prime Minister at the United Nations. In all his roles, Daniel Jean has always protected Canada's vital interests, including the proper management of classified information.
Honourable member for Edmonton Strathcona.
Mr. Speaker, this morning, the Environment Commissioner released an historic report on combined audits of federal, provincial and territorial governments' climate action. She reported more than half of all governments have no reduction targets. Only 2 are on track to meet those targets. Most governments have failed to assess climate risks or deliver adaptation plans, including federal departments and agencies. She reported that Environment Canada has failed to provide leadership and is failing to measure, monitor, report publicly. When will this government provide real accountability and establish an independent commission to advise, audit and report on progress?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Environment.
Mr. Speaker, the reports of the Commissioner are very important to highlight the status of issues and to highlight issues that require attention. We welcome this report, but let's be clear about what she said. Number one, she said that most audits, including almost all of the federal audit, was done before the achievement of the Pan-Canadian Framework. Secondly, she said the Pan-Canadian Framework represented significant progress and she looked forward to seeing its implementation. And third, she commented that this was one of the best climate plans that Canada has ever had. Mr. Speaker, we agree. We have a plan to achieve our commitments and we are committed to doing so.
The Honourable Member for Rosemont-la-Petite-Patrie.
Your targets. Monsieur le Président, voulez-vous bien me...
Mr. Speaker, can you explain what the point is in having greenhouse gas emission targets when you're not taking them seriously? This morning, the Environment Commissioner brought forward a report, and it was a scathing report for the Liberal government. The small steps that they have taken to meet our targets do not meet our international commitments. And the Liberals will even miss the targets that the Conservatives set under Stephen Harper. What is the Liberal government waiting to act to meet our international commitments? Just like to remind the member for Rosemont-la-Patrie that he must address his questions through the chair. I think he knows that. So in future, please address him through the chair. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, we've been actively implementing the Pan-Canadian Framework on clean growth and climate change, and we're starting to see results, putting Canada on a path to meet its emissions reduction targets under the Paris Agreement. As was published in December 2017 in Canada's third biennial report to the United Nations, Canada's greenhouse gas emissions are projected to be 232 megatons lower than was expected in early 2016. This decline relates directly to the achievement of the Pan-Canadian Framework. It is the biggest improvement in Canada's emissions outlook since the reporting began. It's widespread across all sectors. It reflects the breadth and the depth and the success of the Pan-Canadian Framework.
The Honourable Member for Richmond-Athabasca. Mr. Speaker, during the catastrophic trip of the Prime Minister in India, the National Security Advisor, Daniel Jean, organized a briefing for journalists on the Atwal affair. Now, somehow, magically, the Minister of Public Safety stated that this information was confidential. Why is the Prime Minister refusing to give that same information to the members and to the Canadians, the same information that he provided to reporters on Parliament Hill? What is he hiding?
The Honourable Minister of Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, what has been offered to the Leader of the Opposition is a complete briefing, including classified information, that would put this entire situation in full context. The Leader of the Opposition is so far declining that offer, but he needs that full context in order to be totally informed. If he would prefer not to be totally informed, then one can only assume that he wants to play politics with disinformation.
The Honourable Member for Richmond Athabasca. Mr. Speaker, what is a classified confidential document according to the Canadian government? It applies to information that, if compromised, could cause injury to the national interest, defence and maintenance of the social, political and economic stability of Canada. So I repeat my question to the Prime Minister. Why did he provide journalists with this classified confidential information that led to a diplomatic issue with India, when he refuses to give the same information to elected members of this House and to the public? What is he hiding?
Minister of Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, I know of no classified information revealed by the National Security Advisor, but to fully inform the Leader of the Opposition about the full context of the Atwell situation, we have offered him a classified briefing with all the essential details. So far, he's declined to receive that information, and that amounts, Mr. Speaker, to willful ignorance and irresponsibility, and the Conservatives are risking putting themselves as pawns of other interests.
Honourable Member for Calgary Nose Hill.
Okay, so if what the Public Safety Minister said was right, the media got no classified information, but they couldn't report the story because they didn't have the full context. And without the full context, they would be spreading misinformation and bits and snippets of false information. So wouldn't you say that without giving Parliament this full context, that in fact it's the Public Safety Minister that's spreading disinformation and playing partisan games?
Well, Order. The Honourable Minister of Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, in case the opposition missed it, the media have already reported all of that information very extensively, and there was no classified information included. And I would point out, as senior Conservative bloggers have done in the last short while, the key issue is the broader and classified context around the Atwell matter. We have offered the Leader of the Opposition to have that full classified briefing, but so far he has declined. So the essential question is why the Conservative opposition is choosing to remain deliberately ignorant.
The Honourable Member for Calgary Nose Hill.
Speaker, given what the Public Safety Minister just said, how is the media supposed to know what was classified information and what wasn't? They've sent out the National Security Advisor, who has some of the most confidential information in our country, to the media. They didn't say what was right, and if they couldn't distinguish that, how could the media put forward a true story at all? The only person here who is admitting to anything is that the PMO put out the Public Safety Advisor of our country to spin for the Prime Minister. This person needs to come to committee. They need to come clear, or else how is Canada supposed to have...
The Honourable Minister of Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, let me make it abundantly clear that we have the utmost respect and trust for Daniel Jean. He has served governments in this country with distinction and honor for over 35 years, and there's no question about his integrity or his dedication to Canada. The honourable member seems to be bewildered, and I think the problem is she doesn't have the facts. We are offering to give her leader the entire classified briefing so she can have the facts and end her stunning bewilderment.
Order. Order. I encourage all members, including ministers, to be restrained in the use of language. Alors,
order.
L'honorable.
The honorable.
Listen to both sides, no matter what they like it or not.
The honourable member for Saint-Hyacinthe-Bagotte. Mr. Speaker, for months now we've been raising serious questions about the Canada Infrastructure Bank. So far, the government has failed to answer our questions, and appointments to the board of directors have only cast further doubt on it. A merit-based selection procedure was promised, but half the bank's directors, half of them, have close ties to the Liberal Party. How does the government explain all this cronyism at the Infrastructure Bank? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Infrastructure. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Infrastructure Bank is an important part of our plan, totaling $196 million to build strong, inclusive communities. The Board of Directors has wide-ranging experience in this field, and we want to build 21st century infrastructure. Political affiliation was not a criterion in any way whatsoever in the selection procedure for the Board of Directors.
Speaker, any appointment process that makes sure mostly Liberals are appointed is not fair, open, or transparent in any way. These appointments of Liberal insiders and supporters is just old-fashioned cronyism at the Infrastructure Bank. While Canadians are waiting for infrastructure projects that are years overdue, while Canadians wait for housing, Liberals are stacking the board with wealthy supporters. Why doesn't this government put Canadians' interests ahead of the Liberal Party and replace the discredited Infrastructure Bank with public investment in infrastructure?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Infrastructure.
Mr. Speaker, let me repeat this in English. The Canada Infrastructure Bank is an important part of our government's 12-year, $186 billion plan to build strong, sustainable, and inclusive communities across Canada, as we promised to do so during the last election. The diverse group of leaders that compose the board bring a wide range of experience to the bank and attract private capital to invest alongside public dollars in building more infrastructure in the public interest. And let me be clear, Mr. Speaker, that political affiliation was neither a qualifying nor a disqualifying criteria for prospective board members, and the member will note there was a donation to the NDP within that board.
The honourable member for Markham Thornhill.
Mr. Speaker, as the Member of Parliament for Markham Thornhill, I am fortunate to be able to meet with scientists and researchers at Seneca College and York University to see the incredible work that they are doing. After 10 years of stalled funding and neglect, with our first budget in 2016, our government immediately began rebuilding Canadian science and research, which the largest investment in fundamental research in over a decade. Est-ce que le ministre des Sciences...
Can the minister inform the House of the next steps our government will take to support science, research, and innovation in Canada? The Honourable Minister.
I want to thank the member for Markham Thornhill for her strong support of science. Mr. Speaker, after muzzling scientists and ignoring evidence for 10 years, the Conservatives are back to attacking Canadian science. Last week, the Conservatives voted against funding for scientists and researchers to do their important work for Canadians.
But our government has committed to support science in Canada, improving the lives of Canadians.
He announced the largest investment in discovery science in Canadian history.
Wow. Honourable member for Milton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Forgive me for being stunningly bewildered, but the minister has said today that there's no need for the National Security Advisor to testify before a committee for the reason that the media has reported everything the National Security Advisor told the reporters. This just in, Mr. Speaker. A very esteemed senior individual journalist, David Aiken, has just said, I had one of those briefings from the senior government official. At several points, the official told me stuff he said I couldn't print. Let's give up the pretense.
That's not quite the same as recognizing someone in the gallery. The Honourable Minister of Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, perhaps the opposition would like to interrogate Mr. Aiken, but the point, Mr. Speaker, is that the full classified context and detail has been offered to the official opposition. They continue to refuse to receive that information. One can only assume that they want to continue to play a political game rather than getting informed of all the facts, and not just from Mr. Aiken, but directly from the senior officials of the Government of Canada.
Order. I would ask the Honourable Opposition House Leader not to be yelling when someone else has the floor. The time to speak, as members know, order, as members should all know, the time to speak is when a member has the floor. And I give that now to the member for Milton.
Mr. Speaker, this government has a troubling history that every time they get pushed on questions that show the fact that they don't have a good answer, they resort to name-calling.
Yes,
yesterday in Finance Committee, I was questioning the minister with respect to his own record on promoting women in senior positions. In response, the minister said I was one of those people he needed to drag with him, and I was a Neanderthal. Unacceptable language. Could the minister please clarify what he was trying to say?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I found it unfortunate yesterday at committee to see the way the opposition behaved with its personal attacks rather than constructive criticism. Mr. Speaker, the issue we're concerned about, that we're addressing, is the fact that the wage gap between men and women. There's a long way to go to reach pay equity, Mr. Speaker, and involving women in the economy at the same level as men is the important thing. And I would be delighted to talk about the very concrete, real steps we're taking to address that challenge.
Speaker, there is no attack in saying the facts. Fact is, the minister never once sought to make sure he had proper representation on his private sector board. Number two, in the finance department, they're woefully lacking in women senior positions, 4 to 11. Number three, in his own office, there's only one woman who's a member of his senior staff. That's his choice. I have every right to ask questions that make this government uncomfortable, and I'm going to continue to do it whether they like it or not.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Finance Minister. Mr. Speaker, we often see the selective amnesia at play in the House, but the previous Prime Minister, Stephen Harper, was far from achieving parity, gender parity in Cabinet. That's the example we've set for Canadians. And in our latest budget, Mr. Speaker, shared parental leave so that there's a better sharing of parental responsibilities between men and women. $1.2 billion over 5 years. That's an idea they should have had when they were in power for 10 years. It's one of the many things we're doing to truly promote gender parity, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Member for Louis Saint Laurent. Yesterday at committee, the only personal attack that we saw was the member of Milton who was the victim of the attack. That's the fact. Mr. Speaker, we didn't know these people could attack a woman in such a fashion, but they obviously don't know how to manage, and they are also hiding things. Today we learn that the President of the Treasury Board has decided to create a $7 billion vote, a new vote in the budget, and they'll spend the money and give the information after the fact. How is that transparent? Why so much secrecy from the President of the Treasury Board? The Honourable President of the Treasury Board.
Delighted to answer this question, to point out that this government is increasing the transparency and accountability of government spending. For the first time in recent history, the main estimates will include all budget measures for the upcoming fiscal year. I would draw the honourable member's attention to the budget. In fact, funding in the main estimates will be tied to a detailed table A211 from the budget, outlining exactly how much will go to each initiative in each department, and they will only be able to spend the money on each specific initiative.
I'm not sure if the member for Edmonton West did not hear me. I can't imagine that his constituents think that he should be talking when he doesn't have the floor. Perhaps they can tell him otherwise, or if they're right. The honourable member for Saskatoon West.
Mr. Speaker, Budget 2018 was a disappointment, with very little new money to help Canadians find safe, affordable housing. The $15.9 billion co-investment fund announced last fall is supposed to start accepting applications in less than a week, but so far, no details. Meanwhile, our existing rental stock is aging, communities are waiting anxiously to make repairs and build new affordable housing, but so far, nothing. How much longer will Canadians have to wait?
The Honourable Minister of Social Development.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On November 22nd, we were very proud to launch the first ever national housing strategy. Canadians had been waiting for a long time for this strategy, Mr. Speaker. We had the fortune of building it with a large number of partners, with the support of many organizations. We are very proud of the result, Mr. Speaker. But we are even more proud of the fact that over the next 10 years, we'll work very hard with a number of partners to make sure that more Canadians have access to affordable housing in this great country.
The honourable member for Churchill, Kiwatinook-Askey.
Mr. Speaker, as the Prime Minister vacations in the mansions of his millionaire friends, First Nations in northern Manitoba are facing a housing crisis.
Yes.
A Pasquat Cree Nation, a shortage of 300 homes. Saugeen First Nation, a shortage of 250 homes. Yet Budget 2018 commits to about enough money to build one house per reserve if you're lucky.
Yeah.
The shortage of housing on First Nations leads to health and well-being challenges for these communities. Communities are trying to find solutions, and yet the federal government is not at the table. Why is this government ignoring the housing crisis on First Nations across Canada?
Yes. Thank you.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary for Indigenous Services.
Mr. Speaker, our government remains committed to co-developing distinctions-based Indigenous housing strategies with our First Nations, Inuit and Métis partners. This is why Budget 2018 invests $600 million over 3 years for First Nation housing, $500 million over 10 years for Métis Nation housing, $400 million over 10 years for Inuit-led housing plan. This funding is a significant step towards addressing the housing needs in Indigenous communities. Our government is committed to closing the unacceptable housing gap for Indigenous communities.
Excellent job.
Honourable member for Elgin, Middlesex, London.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Conservatives undertook consultations that Liberals refused to, and we led the charge against the Prime Minister's summer jobs values test. Well, Liberals started attacking us. Now they're starting to back down. But that won't be good enough for the kids this year, for charities that feed the hungry this year, and for churches who provide childcare this year. So why are they waiting until next year to do the right thing?
Yeah. Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Employment.
Mr. Speaker, make no mistake, the actions taken by this government were actions that would defend the rights of all Canadians. Women's groups, immigrants, Mr. Speaker, the gay, lesbian, transgendered, queer community, they fought long, hard battles to earn those rights, and they expect their government to stand and defend them. And I'm proud to be part of a government that did exactly that.
The honourable member for Lévis-Lotbinière. Mr. Speaker, once again, the Liberals have proven they can't be trusted to defend Canadians' rights. The summer jobs program was working just fine under the previous Conservative government, but instead of following the advice of the official opposition, who warned that the values test was an attack on Canadians' fundamental rights, the government barged ahead. Mr. Speaker, now that the Labour Minister has admitted her values test was inappropriate, why doesn't the Prime Minister instruct her to get rid of it immediately instead of waiting till the next election?
Mr. Speaker, one of the benefits of being in this House for 18 years, you can remember back to when the Conservatives wanted to cut the program out entirely. But Mike Savage, Maria Minna, the Liberal caucus fought hard to make sure that that program was reinstituted. They got dragged back into that program, Mr. Speaker, and then put no more money in it from 2006 on. We doubled the amount of money. We doubled the amount of people that were in that program.
The Honourable Parliament Secretary gets everybody excited. Order. The Honourable Member for Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Clearly the Liberals will clap at anything because it's no justification for discrimination to say we increased funding to the program that's discriminating. That's what we're talking about here, Mr. Speaker. After the Liberals voted down our motion, now they're saying they might not proceed with the values test next year. But the minister continues to deny funding to charitable organizations who are helping the very groups the member talks about this year. So if the parliamentary secretary knows that the values test is bad for an election year, why won't he get rid of it right now?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, this government appreciates and respects the work that those religious groups do, Mr. Speaker, and they know they were contacted and they know that they could very well apply for grants, Mr. Speaker. I know in my own riding, there were 21 groups last year that applied and received funding. There are 21 groups that applied this year and most likely will receive funding, Mr. Speaker. The MPs that did their job know that that's the truth.
Honourable Member for Hamilton East, Stony Creek. Order.
Mr. Speaker, as co-chair of the All-Party Steel Caucus, I'm proud to have hosted our Prime Minister in Hamilton earlier this month, and we sat and talked with steelworkers from both ArcelorMittal, Dofasco, and Stelco, as well as union representatives and stakeholders, and we heard firsthand the concerns that they have over steel import tariffs and their unintended consequences concerning steel dumping. So can the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Foreign Affairs please update this House on the strong measures announced by our government today to address this important issue?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank the member for Hamilton East, Stony Creek for his question and for organizing the Prime Minister's visit to Hamilton to meet steelworkers. The transshipment and dumping of unfairly cheap foreign steel and aluminum is a threat to Canadian jobs and the North American NAFTA market. Canada has one of the toughest enforcement regimes in the world with 71 trade remedy measures already in place. We're strengthening this enforcement further, including new powers for CBSA, and we will always stand up for Canadian steel and aluminum workers and for NAFTA. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Member for Lakeland.
Mr. Speaker, on March 1st, when the Public Safety Minister was asked why the Liberals won't let the National Security Advisor appear at committee, he said, quote, "You are asking me to wade into a classified discussion. I can't do that." Then he ran away from questions to the elevator. Today, he says none of the information given by that advisor to the media was classified. On what date was the minister telling the truth?
Honourable Minister of Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, as I have said consistently, the comments that have been attributed to the National Security Advisor in the media disclose no confidential information. The challenge, of course, is the questions that members of the opposition want to pursue in relation to classified matters in the context of this whole affair. Mr. Speaker, we have offered to answer those questions. We have offered to give them the whole information, Mr. Speaker. They continue to refuse.
The Honourable Member for Trois-Rivières. Mr. Speaker, passengers who got stuck on Air Transat flights still remember the minister's promise to fix the problem quickly by creating a passenger's Bill of Rights. A year later, and 2.5 years after their election, still nothing. And their proposed legislation could double the time passengers have to wait on the tarmac before assistance arrives. The Liberal government lacks resolve in dealing with abuses committed by airlines. Can the minister confirm whether he will have the courage to amend his bill? C-49. Honourable Minister of Transport. Mr. Speaker, I always try to show courage in everything I do in life. I promised that there would be a passenger Bill of Rights when this bill is passed. The Transportation Bureau will oversee that Bill of Rights. It'll be the best passenger Bill of Rights in the world. And if my colleague could just be a little bit patient, he will see this come into being. The Honourable Member For Vimy, Mr. Speaker, in a healthy and prosperous society, it's crucial to ensure that everyone has equal opportunities in the economy. Can the Minister for Status of Women tell us what Budget 2018 does to further empower women so they have equal opportunity to work in their field of choice and to advance their career regardless of what stage they're at in their professional development? Thank you. The Honourable Minister. I'd like to thank my colleague from Vimy for her leadership in promoting gender equality. When we invest in women, we improve the economy for everyone.
Measures to close the gender wage gap, including an investment of $1.65 billion for a women entrepreneurship strategy, to support women to start and grow their businesses and to benefit from trade agreements, and to create jobs for all Canadians, because when we invest in women, we grow the economy for everyone.
Honourable Member for Kamloops, Thompson, Caribou.
Mr. Speaker, last year my constituents went through the worst BC wildfire in history. In the aftermath, residents were tried to salvage what they could, harvesting some of the wood on their property. It's now tax time, and the capital gains from selling their wood is putting them into a higher tax bracket. We have seniors losing their OAS and their GS. Months ago, we asked the Finance Minister to create a simple fix. We have not even had the courtesy of a response. So will the government do what they said, stand by the victims, and commit to fixing this failure today?
The Honourable Minister of National Revenue. Mr. Speaker, we recognize that Canadians affected by forest fires, particularly in BC, are experiencing hardship, and the agency is committed to helping solve the problem. In cases of disasters like the fires in question in BC, each application for relief will be studied individually, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Member for Terrebonne. Mr. Speaker, talks are dragging on between Davie and the federal government over ship conversions because Ottawa can't get its act together. While Ottawa makes the shipyard get down on its knees and beg for a contract for the conversion of 3 used icebreakers, it's come to light that they have a plan up their sleeve to build 6 brand new ones. There are 800 workers in Quebec City waiting to get back to work. What's the government doing? Do they have a plan? The Honourable Minister of Public Services. Mr. Speaker, we recognize the excellent work of Davie Shipyard's workers, and we're trying to negotiate with Davie Shipyard with regard to the icebreaker needs of the Coast Guard. We are continuing to talk, and the talks are continuing. The Honourable Member for Terrebonne. Mr. Speaker, that doesn't sound much like a plan to me. Do you know what does sound like one, though? This, $100 billion in shipbuilding contracts, none for Quebec. 4 icebreakers to convert, take out the most lucrative one and put the rest on ice. 6 new icebreakers, keep that under wraps. 7 frigates in need of maintenance, rig the bid to shut out Davie Shipyard. The question is, Mr. Speaker, is part of the government's plan to make Davie Shipyard go belly up? The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, the Coast Guard has identified its needs for icebreaking, and we are working with Davie Shipyard to meet those needs. We're negotiating. We continue our talks. It's ongoing, Mr. Speaker.
I'd like to draw to the attention of honourable members the presence in the gallery of Mrs. Georgette Leblanc, the 8th Parliamentary Poet Laureate. The Honourable David Eby, Attorney General for the Province of British Columbia. And Mr. Fred Sasakamoose, Elder of Atu-Kokip Cree Nation, a former former student at St. Michael's Indian Residential School, the first Indigenous hockey player in the NHL, and the inspiration for Richard Wagamisa's award-winning book and the film of the same name, Indian Horse. Mark, orders of the day.
Government orders, Ways and Means, motion number 23, consideration of a Ways and Means motion to implement certain provisions of the budget tabled in Parliament on February 27, 2018, and other measures.
Ms. Tager for Mr. Morneau, seconded by Ms. Pettipaw-Taylor, moves that a Ways and Means motion to implement certain provisions of the budget tabled in Parliament on February 27, 2018, and other measures be concurred in. Is it the pleasure of the House to adopt the motion? All those in favor of the motion will please say yea. All those opposed will please say nay. In my opinion, the yeas have it. Calling the members.